And so you knew you were submitting an article. Did you know you were possibly the cover girl?
No, I did not. That was a surprise, and I want to thank you, Carmi, for for letting the cat out of the bag on that one. That was really great to see, and I found out afterwards that some of my other Bead Society members were in on it too. They kind of went, "Hey, we saw that you were, on the cover of the February-March issue." So yes, that was a surprise.
We have another surprise for you.
Oh, you do? You have one? Oh, that's so nice. First time I've seen it. Wow. Almost to scale even. Wow, that's very nice.
I think they did a beautiful job on both the cover and the article inside. It must be so surprising for you to see it now. It's finally printed.
When you see something in print, it's a whole different thing, right? So, wow, that looks good. Very nice. So dragonflies for me there's a story there. Whenever I was a little girl and I was out in the outdoors during the summertime, the dragonflies would always come and land on my shoulder. And when you're a little kid, sometimes you're worried about these things, or you're scared of spiders and all these sorts of things. But I was never afraid of dragonflies. But every summer, there would always be 2 or 3 that would land on my shoulder throughout the summer. And I always thought they had a lot of character, and I always thought that they were like an interesting little animals. So I started feeling a connection to them, and so that sort of became something that I started to incorporate into my work. Because when we create our artwork, we're always trying to tell a story, and that story can be a personal one or it can be a cultural one. Because as an Indigenous artist, we always want to put something that's important to us in what we're creating. And so for me, a lot of my stories are personal, but they talk about those various life journeys that I've had and those relationships that I have with the other living beings that we share the world with. And so I do the dragonfly to honor that relationship that I have with the dragonflies, that I think I have with the dragonflies. They seem to be okay with me, so yeah.
What prompted you to start this current series of dragonflies?
Well, it started out as a bead challenge. And I'm always telling people, from a creative perspective or an artistic perspective, it's 90% thought and 10% execution. And I belong to a couple of bead societies, the Toronto Bead Society and the Grand River Bead Society. And the Toronto Bead Society, every year they do what they call a bag of bead challenge, also known as Bob. And it's a random assortment of beads. And the rule is you have to use one of everything in that bag. So even if it's a packet of seed beads, you got to use at least one of those seed beads. And so I created, for the 1 year, a dragonfly cuff. But I'd actually been thinking about it for 2 years before I actually got to the point where I started to design it and create it. And I used our Bag of Bead challenge as sort of the impetus for creating that first dragonfly cuff. And so the theme kind of carried on from there. Then I started to create dragonfly medallions. I did a cuff workshop. Now I'm working on a secret dragonfly art piece. So it's just something that I enjoy. And when I'm creating the piece, I'm still thinking about those childhood days of when I would have those friendly little dragonflies just land on me. And you know what's amazing about them is that they spend like the first 5 or 6 years of their life underwater as a dragonfly nymph. 5 or 6 years. Then they come out after they've developed as a dragonfly, and then their lifespan's only for like that summer. Isn't that crazy? I know. So there's a lot to be said about dragonflies, other than my childhood thoughts about them.
So one of your dragonfly designs now is on the cover of the current issue of Beadwork. How did that happen?
Well, I was approached by Beadwork Magazine after they saw a series of classes that I was offering. And they said, like, we really like your designs. We think that they're a different approach than what we're normally showing people in our publication. Would you consider doing not dragonfly project, but a project? At that point, I wasn't sure what it was going to be. And so I said, I'll think about it. That's my typical response, because as a cultural custodian for my nation and for my Indigenous people that I have a relationship with, I wanted to make sure that they were okay doing a article on Indigenous beadwork. So that meant that I had to go and consult with different members of my community to find out what they thought, because I just didn't want to go ahead and do that, because this represents 200 years of Indigenous ideology, right, behind creating beadwork. So one of my elders, lovely woman from Ganawage, I said, "So what do you think?" She's like, "I don't know." She goes, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I'm like, "Well," I said, "that's why I'm asking you." And she's like, "Well," she goes, "Well, it's up to you." Like, she's a lovely but very forthright, beautiful Mohawk woman. And then I asked a couple of other people, and their main concern was just to make sure that the art was going to be respected. Sometimes when we turn something into like a commodity, the stories aren't there anymore. The things that we're supposed to be respecting about the art isn't there anymore. So I went back to beadwork, and after I talked to several people, and I said, "We'll do this." I said, "But there's a few things we have to keep in mind." I said, "We need to be respectful to the art form, respectful to Indigenous culture, and the way we have to approach the project is in an honorable way. Like, not just that it's like something that you just make and take or that sort of thing." He said there's a process, there's a whole history there that needs to be explained. And they were totally on board. That's exactly what they wanted. They wanted to take away from that idea that it's just a piece of beadwork, that there's a lot of nuances and a narrative there that needed to be honored. And so once we got all of those formalities out of the way, then it came to the point where I had to think about, well, what do I want to do? And like I said before, I've been thinking about this for a while. And I said, we should do some dragonfly earrings. And then I had to, of course, think about how I wanted to do that. Like, what was that going to look like? What type of shape was it going to take into its design? And so I came up with a template that I did originally, and it's a miniature version of some of the dragonfly designs that I had done already. I have a graphic art background, so it's easy for me to make my visuals come to life on the computer first. So once I came up with the basic design, I then had to source out materials, and so that was an interesting part of the project too. Usually I grab a whole bunch of stuff and then I sort of play around with things, and so that's part of the design process that I consider whenever I'm working on something that I've never done before. That there is those little steps that I take in order to create the project itself.
Thank you so much for sharing the experience with us today. We really appreciate it. And as you know, as John Bead, we're so happy you use some of our products. And we're going to have a giveaway associated with this. So we thank you so much for coming in today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And nice to share my artwork. And yay, John Bead.